All right.
How is everybody this morning?
Great.
All right, fantastic. I think the class full of energy this morning. Who is excited for today's guest lecture with Paula
Fired up.
Alexander? Fantastic. So I am really excited. I know this is going to be our first in-person guest lecture this semester. But I'm really excited for module 4, where we are studying sustainable marketing and conscious consumer behavior to welcome to class Paula Alexander, who's been leading sustainability at Burt's Bees and in a range of marketing and sustainability focused roles at Burt's Bees for 16 years now. And so, yes, very excited for today's conversation. I know we are expecting, so we've got one guest, we're expecting 2 more additional guests. So we've got a couple students from Schema Business School who are going to be joining us for today's lecture as well. So welcome and excited to have you as part of the conversation. So I think we've got a couple more students who will be coming in a few minutes. So introduce yourselves, meet them, make them feel comfortable. But as we kick off today's guest lecture, I'm really excited. I was sharing with Paula the whole purpose of these guest lectures. We've had a chance to watch recordings of incredible guest lectures over the course of this semester, is really to take what you're learning right through the readings, through the videos, what you're sharing in your Q&A discussion forums, and give you an opportunity to hear from a sustainability leader, innovator, who is putting these principles, these frameworks, these theories into practice to help you see what the challenges are on the ground in the real world, and also what the opportunities are. And so I think this is a particularly exciting guest lecture for me as well, because we have the opportunity to hear about Burt's Bees, which I think is really an iconic, sustainable brand. And so oftentimes when I ask students to give me examples of B corporations, oftentimes Burt's Bees is mentioned, with Patagonia, with 7th Generation, with Ben & Jerry's. And although Burt's Bees is not a certified B corporation, I think it's really thought of as one of the brands, one of the companies that's really leading and innovating in this space. And so excited to hear more from Paula. You'll get a chance to hear more about really the evolution of the Burt's Bees brand from really kind of a small, kind of really early stage innovator in the sustainability space, through the transitions that happened with the Clorox company acquiring Burt's Bees. I think probably maybe within months or a year after you joined the company, to see how the brand and the company has evolved since then, and continues to even to this day. So as we are discussing issues in the class related to authenticity and transparency when it comes to communicating and engaging and educating and informing customers, I think Paula can help make some of those issues real. What does that look like in the real world? And as we're talking about issues related to building a circular economy, which I know is part of the vision for Burt's Bees, what does that look like on the ground? What are the challenges in really building that into a living, breathing, transitioning business model? And so I encourage you to ask questions over the course. So Paula's got some prepared slides. So I encourage you to ask questions as they come up during Paula's talk, and whatever she can answer during the recorded part of the conversation she'll tackle. She may hold a few questions for the end. This is an opportunity for some discussion, for some Q&A, but also I think for you to hear from somebody who's really been leading and innovating in the space for quite a while. And so, Paula, thank you so much for making the time to come back to join us in class. And will you please help me welcome Paula Alexander?
Jessica and I caught up in the parking garage on the way over here, and we were saying, when was the last time you were here? I think it was around 2019. So a lot has happened in the world since I was last in a classroom like this one, and I think I've joined online a couple other occasions. But yes, as Jessica mentioned, please do ask questions throughout. I think that's what makes it much more interesting. is if we can connect some of the dots between what you're studying throughout this course, but also in other parts of your business school curriculum. And this is all just, happening very real time. It's still, believe it or not, a fairly emergent field in the space of business. So I will take you through a little bit around sort of Clorox and Burt's Bees, a little bit of the what we've done, some of the goals we've set, how we're making progress against those goals. But then I also have a little bit at the end in terms of what are some of the critical sort of practices that we see as essential for driving sustainability through not only the Burt's Bees business, but also many of our other businesses at Clorox. And that's actually the last 2.5 years, that's been my role. I've stayed sort of part-time on Burt's over the last 2.5 years, but at the very start of the pandemic, my job expanded to integrate sustainability into all of our other businesses and brands at Clorox. So I can speak to that as well. There's a woman named Solitaire Townsend, who is a founder of Futerra. They're a great sort of thought leader agency out of the UK. And she calls them born good brands and born again brands. And the born good brands are those like Burt's Bees, that sustainability is just part of our ethos. It's what we do. And that's how we can be so pioneering. And then there's those born again brands that are those huge incumbent brands like Tide or Clorox Bleach or Kingsford Charcoal that we also have to make more sustainable and figure out how do you unlock those possibilities for brands like that to be more sustainable and then ultimately more regenerative as well. So that's a little bit of how we'll be approaching this today. I think we've got roughly an hour and 15 minutes. I've got, I think probably 30, 40 minutes of prepared slides, but then we could also get into some richer conversation and dialogue as well. There we go. All right, so it's just a little bit of context. Clorox is about a $7 billion company, and we're in 25 countries, almost 9,000 employees. And you can see this rich portfolio of brands, but what is that through line that connects all of those brands? And we think it's really our corporate purpose, where we say we want to champion people to be well and thrive every single day. And so that's what we intend to do with all of our brands that not only sit underneath that broader corporate purpose, but that also have their own brand purposes that they're bringing to life with consumers and other stakeholders. But I'm really proud of that number 2 most sustainable ranking that we have as a Clorox company. We've been doing it for a long time. We had sort of our first eco office back in the early 2000s, start looking at product sustainability and how do we become more sustainable as a company. And we've formalized that over the years, but I think that we're kind of a quiet company when it comes to what we do in sustainability. So it's really nice to see those types of recognitions that are coming through. And this is really what we consider our ESG narrative. And you probably are hearing that term, ESG, environmental social governance. We use it as a little bit of a shorthand at Clorox for sustainability. But today, ESG is very much just an investor term. You're not going to hear that much anywhere beyond maybe business schools and Wall Street. And I think that's okay, because I think sustainability is really that broader term that's more encompassing of both the environmental and the social responsibility. But we all need shorthand, and I think ESG works pretty well for us. But it doesn't just sit with the environmental sustainability. Where I've been living in our sustainability center has been focused primarily on those clean world goals, which are about sustainable packaging, sustainable operations, and reducing plastic and other waste. But we also recognize that sustainability includes people. It must include people to be relevant. And so many people feel like you can't solve one without solving the other. So we also include our healthy lives pillar, as well as our thriving communities pillar under all of this. And then this was really an idea from Burt's Bees that we carried over to the company. And we call it our bedrock practices. Those things that are sort of, we've either achieved them and have to continue to sustain them, or they're things that we will just continue to work hard to make sure that we're incorporating that into all of our business practices. So those are the things that, and we call it, we've got to do the right thing value at Clorox, and that really should underpin everything that we're doing. So as we think about broadly, what has Burt's Bees built towards the Clorox company, and what have we borrowed? I think this is really important when you're thinking about a multi-branded organization and or business units within a broader organization is what are you building and borrowing from one another? Burt's Bees really brought to Clorox this idea of the total value chain approach. Starting source to disposal is the scope of sustainability. Pretty much what the B Corporation philosophy is all about, as well, as you know. But that's really the way we look at it, is that you can't just lean into one area, such as energy within your operations. You really need to have that source to disposal approach. This focus on long range goal setting and sticking to it and driving your sort of accountability internally and externally against it, including social sustainability within the scope of your sustainability, and then having that strong purpose culture that really serves as your why for the organization. Those are all things that we have helped, I think, Clorox become more mature in over the last, call it 17 years of ownership. And then what we got from Clorox was this idea of just much more robust measurement, reporting, and substantiation of our claims as we matured as a company. We are 100% renewable energy for the Clorox company in North America. So that's by way of a virtual purchase power agreement. So that also supports us at Burt's. Life cycle analysis capabilities, more and more the work has to be grounded in that. You can start with the principles and develop and innovate through life cycle thinking, but it's really, you have some surprises when you go deeper into the data and have life cycle analysis data supporting your decisions. And then finally, just the scale of the company has helped afford additional partnerships for us. So all of that together, I think, is why you're really seeing the move of companies to purchase smaller, pioneering sustainability companies, and then how they're thriving together, because there's a lot you can gain. Yeah.
Can you share more about the purchase power agreement? We haven't really discussed that in class, so it might be interesting for the students to learn a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, sure. So there's renewable energy credits, which is one way that you can call it offset the power that you're using in your operations. Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are the sort of the burn and buy part of your energy. So the things that you're actually burning on site, such as natural gas or the electricity that's fueling your operations that you're purchasing, those are the Scope 1 and 2 emissions that we're looking to buy credits against. We don't have, our manufacturing facilities aren't always in great places where you can just invest in solar fields right there and have your own solar investments. But virtual power purchase agreements are a way that you can do that by really buying the same amount of electricity through renewable energy to sort of account for that same level of electricity that you may be buying because you happen to be in North Carolina and are beholden to the North Carolina grid, which is a fair share of coal powered. So we wanted to be able to have the energy credits for that, and that's how we're able to get to 100% renewable energy powered in North America. Our first power purchase agreement was for solar fields in Texas. And then we realized that there was some unpredictability of that grid after the last couple of years. And our next agreement is actually with wind power in Oklahoma. So we'll focus from here on out pretty much on Burt's Bees. And I'll share with you first just the Burt's Bees story. Many people don't always realize that it wasn't just Burt. They were co-founders. It was Burt and Roxanne. We call them the artist and the beekeeper. Burt was definitely the pretty face on the front of the packaging, but Roxanne was the kind of the entrepreneurial spirit behind the business. She met Burt Actually, he was selling honey on the side of the road up in Maine. And that's kind of the way he made his living. But they were both sort of kindred spirits in that they loved nature. They wanted to live off the grid and were kind of saying no to some of the sort of the dynamics that were going on in the 80s and 90s in the US. And they said, nope, we're out of here. We're going to go live up in Maine and thrive in nature. But you can't necessarily do that for free. And Roxanne had twins that she needed to support. So she met Bert, saw that he was selling little jars of honey for like $5. And she was like, well, or actually quart size jars of honey for $5. And she said, well, if you actually sold a much smaller amount, put a pretty label on it and a bow, you could sell it for a lot more. And so she really brought in the idea of sort of that attention to detail, the marketing aspects, branding aspects, because she did have her artist background and literally would sketch out on the front of a napkin the sort of images that she wanted on the front of pack. So she was really the one who brought the business mind to the relationship. And, they started out, the first products were these candles in small craft fairs up in Maine. A boutique in New York got a hold of them, and from there it just started blossoming. So that was in the early 80s. We were established in 1984. And this is sort of a grid of all those key milestones that have happened since 1984 and to here in 2022. I'll just point out a few of the big ones. Roxanne finds a recipe for lip balm in a farmer's almanac. So after making candles, decides to go into the lip balm business. And today that is still the lion's share of our business and our biggest product overall, our flagship product. We moved to North Carolina in 1994. The state was actually giving a lot of tax credits and incentives for companies to come this way. And this is a much more central distribution point than Maine. So we came to North Carolina and have had a variety of locations from Raleigh to Hillsborough to now in Durham, where we are today. We expanded into internationally starting in 2000, and we went through our flag planning phase where we did 24 countries in 24 months and realized that, whoa, there's a lot of work to be done with that. And then contracted again after time, over time. We got our Leaping Bunny certification, which is basically ground floor for beauty and personal care products these days. It's probably the number one sort of sustainability attribute that people look for in beauty and personal care. So we were kind of ahead of the game doing that in 2008. We really started improving our technologies and R&D here in around 2010. There for the longest time, natural products were kind of considered, they may not work as well, but I feel really good about them. They're better for people and planet. But it was really here around 2010 when we started really saying parity performance in key categories, and that you can do it with natural ingredients. We continue to expand into additional categories in the early 2010s. Had supported bees throughout that decade, probably between 2010 and 2020. And that was really a kind of a recognition that we need to give back, and we can use that really as an opportunity for marketing to stand for something beyond just natural and beyond lip balm. And then as we continue to move on to where we are today, we're really leaning into sustainable packaging and focusing on kind of the footprint beyond just our energy and our waste footprint to things like our plastic footprint and how other effects that we're having on our planet and on people. It wouldn't be a sort of a focus on marketing. Oh yeah.
Would you be able to elaborate on the congressional testimony?
Yeah, that would actually, I would put that under an umbrella of sort of an advocacy strategy that we've had at Burt's Bees. Call it in the 2000s. We were really 2007, 2008. We were really advocating for standards around natural, and we continue to do that work today too, because there really is no common definition. Sort of a regulated definition of natural. So we started that work. But then also where we testified before Congress around the bees was we were working with a group called the Pollinator Partnership. And they have really great relationships on Capitol Hill. There's so much that can be done to protect our lands for pollinators. So it was really in that space was advocating for the role that business can play in supporting lands and protecting land for pollinators, but also that important intersection between human and honeybee health. So that was really by way of that partnership and joining them on Capitol Hill, I think during Pollinator Week, which is sometime in June. And then I was moving here to say that, you know, it would be a focus on marketing if we didn't include our consumer. So always starting with the consumer, what are they needing? What are they desiring? And I'd say that, you know, the great news is that that slice of green consumers back in 2007 has really expanded. We would say that, you know, really sustainability is interesting for most consumers today. It's just which angle in are you using? Is it more about humanity and livelihoods, or is it more about sort of the planet and nature? But more and more consumers are expecting companies to be more sustainable. And this is what we call our next gen consumer values, because we're focusing on this as being the area really where there's so much growth in beauty and personal care. They are a smaller portion of sales today, but they're representing a huge portion of the growth, and certainly what we consider the future of the category. So you are all in this group, so you may be able to relate to a lot of the values that are across the top of the page here. But you know, representation, diversity, and inclusion is so important. It's you know, it's who you are and what you believe in. Transparency continues to be super critical. That authenticity. Social media has only driven more accountability in all areas, whether it's government or industry. So transparency is so critical, and actually transparency has been a value since we began. We always had that. What we call the natural bar on the front of our packs to say how natural are these products. So transparency has been a key value of Burt's Bees from day one. Community, continue to build those collaborations and go beyond your own boundaries to make an impact. Activism, there's this expectation that business will be a voice for good and a voice for change, and that really is relevant for this consumer market. And then the mental health and self-care. You know, our brand is a lot about self-care just by nature of the category we're in, but also this notion of kind of the way we've been crafted with care. That really speaks to this idea of caring for oneself and crafting things with care. So those are a few of the trends and the consumer values that we're focused on as we continue to keep this brand fresh and modern and relevant for consumers. One of the things that I would say was 3-4 years ago, we were with our target customer team, and the buyer said, well, you guys have become the P&G of natural. And we're like, could you have anything worse to say to us than we've become the P&G of natural? Because it just meant that we were kind of the old stodgy business that's been around for hundreds of years. We said, we've got to make sure that we're staying relevant and modern and ahead of the curve. So this actually is how we plan to do that. This is a new brand positioning for us. We call it Committed to Craft a More Beautiful World since 1984. The by nature is a piece that's kind of been front and center for us as a brand for a while. It's about the natural ingredients, the efficacy of natural. The for nature is one that we feel like really hasn't been played up as strategically as it could be. We want to make sure that it's much clearer what we're standing for. If I asked each of you today what we stood for, you'd probably give me a different answer. And we want to make sure that through our marketing, we're getting much more focused on what we are standing for when it comes to nature. And then the for all piece is really, I'd say, an addition, and it's becoming, I think, a right to play for most brands, is that we have to acknowledge the diversity of our world. And this is something that we really feel like that we need to make sure we're stretching ourselves on from a formulation standpoint, from a representation standpoint in our marketing, but also how we interact with our employees and how we engage with all stakeholders. So that piece is really new for us.
Could you share more about the strategy behind the 1 case of lip balm to 1 acre of protected land?
Yeah, I would say it's not really a strategy yet, but it's something that Roxanne used to say when she would go over to the plant. It's actually our manufacturing facility over near the airport. She would see the cases of lip balm coming off the line. And of course, our technology is a lot faster, a lot more scale, a lot bigger than what she used to see 20 years ago. But she would say that, yes, I don't look at that as a case of lip balm. I see that as an acre of protected land. The profit that she would get from a case of lip balm would be equivalent to what she could protect in terms of lands up in Maine. So we really like that idea, you know, whether it's the Tom's model or other models, is like if we're really taking our profits and being a more responsible business and doing more good with that, then that's a way that can really resonate with people. So it's something that we think a lot about, and it's something that internally we've been sharing with a lot of our employees to really keep bringing home the role that our business can play when it comes to being responsible. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I was
Your
curious.
interest?
I was curious just to connect it back to the consumers, like those consumers and what they're interested in looking at companies that are making an impact. Are consumers interested in land trusts, and where does that money, where do those profits go to? How are we protecting that acre? Is it land trust? Where are we putting that money? And does that resonate with consumers?
Mhm. Yeah, we have, I think I've got a slide at the very end in here about the Burt's Bees Foundation, which we established in 2007. And we was originally just intended to be sort of a philanthropic arm of the business, to be a good neighbor in our community. But over time, we've made it much more strategic in terms of our giving, to say that it's about reconnecting people to nature, but it's also about providing nature access. So those are the things that we have been investing in as a foundation, and it's something that we should be probably amplifying more with our consumers as well. But it kind of goes back to what is the message of the day. We're working with our marketers frequently to say what product launches do we have this year, and then what might be that umbrella or that always on campaign be. And when you're we're still in the scheme of things a smaller brand, our investments are good, but in the beauty and personal care world, when you're competing against Revlon and Olay and all these other brands that really can invest a lot of money into campaigns, it's hard to balance it all. So we're again, I think it goes back to how can we be more strategic with our communications so that we're getting more single-minded and saying what resonates and where are we investing. I just came off of a conference last week. If you follow sustainable brands at all, I would encourage you to go to that website. You scroll down to the very bottom, you can see a newsletter and sign up for that. But sustainable brands, I love them because they really focus at this intersection of sustainability and marketing and how to drive that value and that unlock with consumers when it comes to sustainability. And we're still trying to figure it out, but we're part of a group within sustainable brands called Brands for Good. And they have this idea that if you focus at the intersection of what the world needs, our major issues, what your consumers want, and then what your brand can uniquely address. So what are your brand assets? And where those intersect is really where you should be putting your campaign, where you should be putting your investments, where you should be focusing. And I think it's our challenge is to take that and say, okay, where do we also fit in the product and our innovation strategies so it can be much more single-minded.
Oh, yeah, I did. You've kind of covered it, but I was curious about that as well, so I'm glad Sarah asked. And I think, I don't know that I've ever seen like a bulk order of Burt's Bees in a store, but I believe y'all can order them through your website. And so like, as a consumer, lip chapstick, or sorry, not chapstick, lip balm, is like somewhat disposable in a way. Like if you were to order a case of it and know that you're making a difference by ordering a bulk order, I think a lot of people would probably opt for that as opposed to picking up one in the grocery store when they think about it.
Yeah, that is, yeah, I mean, you're saying that, I mean, you can consider that like a club pack is more of a bulk order. And we really debated for the longest time, should we be going into clubs? Should we be giving, incentivizing people through a value to buy 10 lip balms at once? How long is that going to last them? Is that pure consumption? Or is that meeting a consumer need? And ultimately, we did go into club stores, and we said we have to make sure that the packaging is indeed sustainable. It can't be a big plastic clamshell like you normally see in club stores. But we also want to make sure that we're offering a variety. Probably 10 peppermint lip balms at one time, unless you're buying it B2B or for some other reason, is probably not what we'd want to be doing. But we have different lip balms for different need states. We've got different flavors, and most people do have, 4 or 5 lip balms at any given time in their glove box on their nightstand in different places. So we said, yes, that's good. And really going back to the life cycle analysis data, some of those club packs can be some of the best, if you have sustainable packaging, can be the best LCA data, because you're actually, less transit, less shipping, assuming they won't lose them. They'll hold on to them and use them for over a period of time, and it can bring down the greenhouse gas impacts and the energy impacts because you are buying in bulk. So yeah, it's all about balancing it.
But as the company continues to grow, and you started with Bird here, how have you scaled in like sourcing for your products? Is it all still in-house, and what initiatives do you have based on like, protecting an acre of land? Are you also putting that away to like or support other businesses that you're sourcing from, or how do you go about that?
Great questions. I'm going to move past this because you probably saw this in our impact report. It was basically kind of progress through 2020. This is where we're aiming for 2025. And to address your question, this is really where our supply chain impacts are. We've got a goal to support 50,000 livelihoods by 2025. And through 2020, we had invested in 10 global supply chain investments, and our plan is by 2025 to be investing in 20 of those. And I've got some examples of some of those investments. But yes, we absolutely believe that, it goes back to life cycle analysis. When it comes to a big CPG companies, you're going to find that about 90% of that company's greenhouse gas emissions are scope 3, which means well beyond what we burn and buy. It's our suppliers, it's our end of life impacts for how consumers are using our products and disposing of our products. And for us, because we're not a lot of water-based like cleansers and shampoos, that's a very small part of our business. Our end of life impacts are pretty low. For us, it's all, and we call them leave-on products, lotions, lip balms. Most of that is in our supply chain. So upstream, we have to start working with all of our suppliers to start asking the question, what are you doing to reduce your emissions, your scope 1, your 2 emissions? What are you doing to address your scope 3 emissions? So those are conversations that our buying team is starting to have now. But then also at the same time, we believe that the responsible sourcing is all about traceability, transparency of your supply chain to ensure that you understand your social and environmental risks and opportunities in your supply chain. And then what are you doing to manage those and ultimately invest in them? So that's sort of our resilient communities. I'm going to just flip right real quick to more of this just to stay on this topic. So you can see these are a few of the investments that we've done, and specifically in our products. And this stuff makes for really great marketing storytelling too. Consumers love that idea of going back to origin. What is the origin of your ingredients? And who are the people that are helping supply those ingredients, and what are you doing to support them? So the whole idea of our community source beeswax has been a pretty central, I'd call it a cornerstone part of our responsible sourcing strategy. We've got great relationships with our beeswax supplier. And we believe that it should be not only us investing in those supply chains, but our suppliers should be as well. So we strike those relationships. And one that I would share even further is this idea of the Women of Shea She-Keeper program, because our beeswax supplier is part of sort of creating the relationships here, as well as all of our Shea partners in Ghana. And then also we brought in USAID. So it's a 3-year program to not only support the women and the shea kernel harvesting that they do, but also to bring bees and beekeeping to those women. So it's another source of empowering them in their communities, and also another source of income. This sort of stuff doesn't just happen overnight. You can imagine the conversations that happened in Ghana and with the US ambassador to Ghana and USAID. And you just kind of start brainstorming, what do we need to be doing differently, and how could we do things differently? So that came about, I say, after about maybe 3 years of conversation, and it's going to be a 3-year program as we invest in that community. But this gives you a sense for just our responsible sourcing programs. And again, you can rely on just your suppliers to tell you what they're doing, or you can have a program where you go on site, visit your suppliers, understand what's truly in your supply chains. And we believe that that's absolutely essential for these types of raw materials, because the supply chains are multi-layer and get murkier and murkier and murkier as you get to the source. So we've traced a huge portion of our waxes, oils, and butters. And now we're moving on to some of our other smaller volume ingredients. And where do you start? Our responsible sourcing manager came on board probably 10 years ago. And as we started laying out that roadmap, you do have to say, okay, how are we going to bite all of this off? And you do it just very methodically, laying out that roadmap and getting to your goals over time.
During this process, did you have any compliance issue with your suppliers?
You know, in our, I would say in our packaging suppliers, we realized that we notice things of concern when our folks go on the ground. And it's at that point where you say, okay, we have this escalating program. If our responsible sourcing director goes on the ground and starts saying some things that there's questions or can't quite get all the questions answered, that's when we will sort of red flag things and say, we probably should get a third-party audit in these areas. And so that's another part of the escalation process, is in those places where after self-certification and after a site visit that we still have questions, we bring in audits. And that tends to be good practice anyway. We're part of a group called AIM Progress, which is a group of global CPG companies looking to drive more responsibility into our supply chains. They have established a sort of a threshold, depending upon company size, how many audits you should be doing annually. And if you're not doing that many audits, then there are fees expected. So I think that's a really good way to ensure. And then there's also mutual recognition of each other's audits, because it is a burden to have the audits done. It stops production or harvesting or what have you to go do those. But they're also really important. So through that organization, we recognize other suppliers' audits. And then over time, you recertify or you go back in and address the red flags. And there's a process for mitigating those risks. And it's kind of that gets you to par it's above that where you say, okay, we're good. This is a solid supply chain. Let's start doing those types of investments and figuring out the investment programs.
Thank you, Paula. How many layers of supply do you have?
It really depends upon the raw material. Yeah, it's,
So it might be very difficult to have some visibility in your supply chain. So I wanted to know, how do you select your supplier? Do you, let's say you have a major supplier who is not really interested in sustainability initiative, will you select that supplier or will you drop that supplier from your supplier network?
yeah, we, everyone at our, and I'll just flip ahead. It's maybe really helpful. So we have what we call our natural standard, which is kind of declares how we will formulate, what type of raw materials we will use. We will only use non-natural ingredients for safety or preservation. So on average, all of our formulas are 98% or more natural origin. And so these are all sort of confidential documents that we give to our suppliers. When we're evaluating new suppliers, we refresh these every 2 years and give the refreshed versions to our suppliers with our expectations. And we're always raising the bar as we update them. I would say it's the responsible sourcing standard that really defines for our suppliers what our expectations are when it comes to who we will work with. And if they can't meet this, then they will not be chosen as a supplier. There are certain suppliers that may go a long way back in our supply chain or in our company's history, where we would not drop a supplier overnight, but it's certainly we have lots of conversations around what do they need to do and to change in order to remain a supplier.
So just a follow-up question, in terms of really measuring the effectiveness of sustainability initiative that you're having, is there any strategy or backward integration to make sure you have more control of the supply chain?
So in terms more of a vertical integration
Yeah.
investing, we have not yet. I think our size and scale doesn't really merit that. So I don't think we would be able to prioritize our investment there. There's some things that we're looking at a Clorox level for some of our larger businesses where we are considering that. We even, Clorox has an investment fund where we're looking at starting to invest because a lot of this is going to be new technologies when it comes to, say, carbon capture, low carbon chemistries for some of our other product categories. And those are the sort of things that we're looking to invest in early stage so that we can have a better line of sight to them in the future. But at this point, we're not looking at vertical integration for Burt's Bees.
Burt's Bees has a lot of products now, like I use Burt's Bees toothpaste. With all these products, do y'all monitor like PFAs and microplastics?
Yeah, we definitely do, and that's definitely a hot topic right now. PFA stands for polyfluorinated. I forget, but it's basically, think of it as that ingredient that you may have seen news stories on it recently. It was a key component in, say, Teflon, and it is showing up. I think it's in all of our bodies at this point, unfortunately, but they call them lifelong chemicals. And so that is something that we're very, it's absolutely a restricted substance that we would not use in our products. But these days, it's also something that, you have to look and see, is it somehow in packaging and it could be leached into products? And that's something that we're also looking at as well. So that's definitely a hot topic, and we're part of a U.S. Plastics Pact, which is a industry kind of value chain organization looking to enable the Ellen MacArthur Foundation goals that so many of us have said. If you've seen a company setting 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable goals by 2025, they're likely an EMF company or have signed on to that. And as part of the PAC's activation, PFAs were a huge part of the conversation, saying how do we keep them out of our plastics value chain and other products. So I think it's it's definitely a hot topic that we're watching. Go back here just a little bit quickly to, we're kind of getting into packaging now, so it's probably useful to look at the full circle future. So whereas this side was, think about it as people, supply chains, livelihoods, full circle future is really the circularity focus that we have at Burt's. You're probably familiar with the take, make, waste linear business model that so many of us have had. And the goal of actually making that a much more circular model, such that we're designing things so that they can be returned into the system at end of life and don't end up as waste. It can be everything from designing for it, like heirloom design, repairing products. Think of Patagonia taking back clothing, repairing it and returning it to the consumer. That would be circularity. Recycling is a form of circularity, returning things into the system to be reclaimed and returned. Recycling today, there's only 9% of materials are getting recycled today, so we know it's not the solution. So we're looking at other things such as reuse, refill. We don't have a goal in that area yet, but I think it's one that the companies increasingly are going to need to look to set, and it's a super difficult one. Greenpeace is calling for 50% reuse for companies like ours. Like, oh boy, we're probably at less than 5% today. And so much of that is because of the challenge of consumers. Consumers are just, it's a different behavior. It's oftentimes not as enjoyable perhaps as that single use beautiful package that consumers, most consumers love today. But it's something that we're going to have to keep cracking. And it's something we're working with retailers on because they can play a huge role in it. We're piloting things. You may have heard of Loop TerraCycle, which is they were doing a pilot where they had all these semi-durable products. A picture of one? Yeah. So you can see we participated here in the Loop program with a glass bottle through the Ulta Loop program. So basically the empty product gets returned to Loop, they clean it, Loop returns it to the manufacturer who refills it, and it goes back to the consumer. So it's ideally a great model if there were scale. There's not scale yet, so it's really not financially viable, but we're all trying to keep the horse in the race because it's a very good offering today to keep learning. And we just committed to Walmart because they're partnering with Loop at a couple stores that have in-home delivery. So people will literally deliver the Walmart products into homes and then be able to collect and take back into the system. So it's all about those reverse logistics. And I was actually talking to folks at Amazon last week at the Sustainable Brands Conference. So Amazon, you've got folks on the ground, you've got trucks delivering to people's homes every day. When are you going to have a reverse logistics solution that we can be a part of? So the retailers are going to be able to play a big role in that. But this is all about circularity. It can also, it's not just packaging. It's about raw materials. So our Mocha lip scrub is using upcycled coffee grounds as a raw material. This lip balm tube it's a combination of post-consumer recycled plastic plus potato starch byproducts or byproduct from the potato industry. And that's our lip balm tube. And then we're actually using upcycled cotton t-shirts from the textile industry for our towelettes these days, which actually makes them compostable. People just don't have a lot of access to compostability today, but they could be composted if that system catches up. So this is all sort of examples of the full circle future. Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about working with retailers to see what they can do. I was wondering if you could speak to socially conservative retailers that carry Burt's Bees, such as Cracker Barrel and Walmart, that are conspicuously silent about Black Lives Matter, about gay rights, about trans rights, and if there's anything that Burt's Bees does in terms of like vetting its retailers.
Yeah. I think that's a important topic and a difficult topic. You know, Walmart is saying they want to be a truly regenerative company, right? And they seem to be doing the right things. Where they get docked is when on the people front, especially for their employees and others. But I think they're increasing their level of awareness of what needs to be done in that area. I don't have any examples of where they're making progress, but at least I think they're saying the right things, and the actions, I don't, you know, hopefully will come along. I was just at the Walmart Sustainability Milestone Summit earlier this month, and they were, what gave me hope was that they had their entire merchandising organization presenting, not just the sustainability team, but the merchandising organization saying why this is important and what they're doing with their buying organization to encourage the right types of businesses in their model. Cracker Barrel is a harder one. I think we distribute it Cracker Barrel, and it's in low distribution, but you know, that goes through what we call our white space team, and I don't know that I wouldn't say that we filter out any customers on that basis today. This is this just briefly, because I would say this is one of the areas where we're trying to be pioneering and get others to follow. You may have heard of offsets, offsetting your greenhouse gas footprint. They're kind of getting a bad rap these days because you have to make sure they're high quality offsets with programs that are going to truly offset your footprint, that they're not being double counted in places, or that they're sort of equivalent to what you are producing or putting out into the environment. And if you think about like science-based targets, which many companies are setting, only a very tiny last bit of those emissions that you cannot reduce, less than 10%, can be offset. So offsets, I think, hopefully will go away one day, but they're an important part of the transition, I think, to a net zero future. And so that idea of carbon offsets is something that's now coming into the plastics value chain. And some companies, Unilever, for example, started talking this idea that for every pound of plastic that they're putting into the environment, they're going to take out an equivalent amount of plastic from the environment. And that's what we're ultimately looking to do. Plastic is not inherently a bad thing. It actually can be a lot lighter weight than, say, glass. And therefore, it's a better life cycle footprint when it comes to measuring your greenhouse gas emissions of shipping and transporting something. But it also extracts virgin materials from the environment, which has its own greenhouse gas impacts. So if you keep plastic in the system, though, if you're working towards circularity, then you can ultimately be lighter on the planet. So we're working on this idea. It's emergent. We're working with a couple organizations. There's a group called Vera that is a standards organization, did offsetting standards. And now they're helping us with plastic standards, plastic footprint standards, which is saying that you can, for every pound of virgin plastic that you're putting in the environment, you need to be taking out an equivalent amount. And that's what we're working towards. So all the while we're trying to do reuse, refill, reduce the total weight of the plastic, move to more sustainable materials such as bioresins, like the potato-based one, we're still having virgin plastic. So until the day we can say that's at zero, I like this. I like this scheme for being able to offset. And so we are now investing in projects like these in India and Ghana to take plastic waste out of the environment. And it's only until you're there. This is Matt Kopak, who's on our team. He went and traveled to these places to see on the ground what life is like for these waste pickers, where they're literally capturing plastic and sorting it, trying to get it into the cleanest, most valuable streams so that they can make money and return it into the system. And so we're working not only with these organizations here, but also with the Recycle Partnership in the US, because even in the US, although we don't have a lot of plastic waste getting into the environment anymore, we still are sending a lot of it to the landfill, where it gets pretty well contained, except for some maybe methane. It gets pretty well contained and isn't going directly into the environment, but we still need to improve our recycling infrastructure. And so that's where we're investing our investments in the US is on things like the US recycling infrastructure. So this is, again, a way of sort of balancing out our impacts as a business with trying to do good and get to that point of balance. It's an interesting area. And I think the more we can get companies to think about how do they do this until we're at all the way to bright, is a good way to transition. We've talked percent natural and our desire to be a natural origin advocate. We've got some folks that are working with the national federal legislation around ISO standards for natural. And then again, I'd say that we are a brand that says we need to get better in this space. We're doing pretty well when we're by nature and for nature, but the for all piece is one that we need to make sure that we're continuing to understand. What is the role that our brand can play in this? What is the role our products can play in all of this? And what do we need to be doing differently internally as an organization that is truly stronger together?
Yeah. I have a question about the don't ban equality piece of this messaging. It just seems to stand out to me. You'd mentioned it earlier. All of the other kind of components of this stronger together messaging seem to be very kind of positive and forward focused. And I was just kind of curious what that was referencing and the origin. It just kind of, that one just kind of stood out to me. Don't ban.
Yeah, don't ban equality was leading up to the overturn of Roe v. Wade. So it's all about believing that we had equal rights to healthcare.
I see. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for clarifying that.
Yep, no problem.
Yeah.
And then we talked about the Birds Bees Foundation. So these are just a few of the things that we've been doing call it our local neighborhood here in the Triangle, a little bit nationwide with the Ed Wilson Biodiversity Foundation and their Half Earth project. And we're just trying to figure out, what will be next as we're actually working with a group called Women's Earth Alliance as well, trying to bring more women's voices into the environmental progress and environmental justice. So that's another space where we're trying to learn and decide where do we invest more and where can we use our voice to amplify those. I think I will leave it at that. Well, maybe one final point here is around the culture of sustainability. There's a very small team at Birds Bees, 4 of us that are looking after sustainability at Birds. And so we really believe that it has to be in everyone's job. I think the thing that gives me hope is that universities today are turning out students that know what sustainability is and have a basis for all of this. And then we've got senior leaders, I think, that are getting really, because their feet are being held to the fire by NGOs, investors, and others. It's that inner sort of rung of management that we've got to keep enrolling and enrolling their heads and their hearts in sustainability. So committing to the culture of sustainability is really important for us. We just had our first culture day after a 2.5-year hiatus at Birds. And we really think it's important to come back every year and recommit to these values and what we stand for and what we do. And we've just incorporated our new positioning, added in some beliefs, and really want people to reflect on what this means for them in their roles, because everybody has a hand, whether it's in our buying organization, whether it's in our packaging developers, our product formulators, or our marketers. Everybody has a role to play in this. So I think I'll end it there on culture. This is some images of Culture Day. And then ultimately, if you are doing all of these things, I think authentically reporting progress, talking about your challenges openly and driving progress against your goals and continuing to raise the bar with those goals. Then you get that external recognition. This was from Real Simple magazine, and they literally created this beautiful cutout and put us on the, you know, the two-page spread, recognizing our brand as one to look after in terms of its sustainability. So it does pay to be sustainable because it gets recognized. All right,